Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Richman here, together, Yitzchak Reuven. Today is the 11th day of the month of Shabbat, 5777. That means that it is Tuesday, the 7th day of February, 2017. And this Shabbat is the Torah reading of Parashat Beshalach, and it is also affectionately known as Shabbat Shirah, the Sabbath of Song, because of the appearance in this week's Torah portion of the Song of the Sea, one of the classic songs of the Torah. And also, this Shabbat is actually Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of the month of Shvat, which is a very important holiday, actually, especially in the land of Israel. But I got to tell you, this Torah portion of Beshalach, Yitzchak, if you had to sum it up with one word, what would that word be?
One word.
I was thinking that you might ask me that, so I was practicing.
I don't think I could sum it up with one word.
I was thinking that it's magnificent.
Oh, magnificent.
I was thinking that it's magnificent and that it basically contains so much mystery. Every mystery in the world is in this Torah portion, and also the greatest mystery of all, which is basically human nature, that I want to kind of get to eventually. Because after everything that the children of Israel had been through, one of the things that this Torah portion seems to emphasize, at least between the lines, is a recurrent crisis of faith. Mm-hmm. It's hard to understand. But basically, after the previous three Torah portions, the first three Torah portions of the book of Shemot, in which we learned of the Egyptian exile, and we followed the dramatic unleashing of the 10 plagues on the Egyptians by God. Parashat Beshalach begins with the details of the Exodus itself, and we see that on the third day, God showed the children of Israel a way to fool the Egyptians, as if they're traveling back towards Egypt, and that would cause Pharaoh to think that they're lost in the desert, so he's going to give chase, and all in order to...
it's a sucker punch.
Exactly. To set them up so that God would take his revenge, and Pharaoh finally realizes that the Israelites have left Egypt and have no intention of returning, so they decide, what have we done? How can we let them escape? So they give chase, they find them stopped by the sea. And every detail here is loaded with so much depth. You know, the fact that the Jews at the sea, even having gone through everything that they went through over the 10 weeks of the plagues, and the obvious loving hand of God on them during that period of time, they're afraid now of the encounter. But I mean, can you really blame them? You know, they're back up against the sea. The Egyptian army is coming. So they cry out and they complain to Moshe, "Why'd you take us out of there? Weren't there enough graves in Egypt?" Harsh words.
That's that Jewish sense of humor.
And then Moshe tells them, well, you just stay still and God is going to fight for you. So we learn about that. We learn about this, the Song of the Sea. And of course, that begins in chapter 15. The Song of the Sea is one of the most amazing parts of the Torah. It is laden, saturated with so many levels of meaning. We've taught about that many times in the past, the fact that it was a very high level of prophecy, the experience of the splitting of the sea, that every single man, woman, and child of the nation of Israel experienced a greater level of prophecy than Ezekiel, the raw faith on which the children were nurtured in that experience, the aspect of it being a future revelation of the joy that will be felt at the anticipated resurrection of the dead. The verse that mentions that the whole reason why this is happening is for them to leave Egypt, come into the land, and establish the Holy Temple. That's verse 17. You will bring them in and plant them on the mount of your heritage, the foundation of your dwelling place that you, Hashem, have made, the Mikdash, the sanctuary that your hands have established. And then, basically, right after that, they come to a place called Marah, where Israel basically, and this is the common understanding of what happened, Israel tested God. Israel tested God. And they cried out to Hashem. They had no water. And in fact, the whole mysterious concept here of Hashem showing Moshe a tree and Moshe throwing it into the water and sweetening the water, that's actually the subject of our video Torah lesson this week. So the Parsha continues with...
Rabbi, can I dwell for a minute on this?
Please.
You said Israel tested God. What do you mean that Israel tested God? I don't understand how Israel tested God.
Well, let's see, how would I explain that? The water, it's not that there wasn't water. Like at other places later in the Parsha, like Refidim, there was water, but it was bitter. What does that mean exactly? There are many levels of understanding of why they felt that the water was bitter. But suffice it to say, for now, the idea, what I'm trying to establish here as we continue, is that every step of the way, from this point on, there was a test. Maybe it was in both directions, because after all, if I want to call it a test of faith, you know how, especially lately, excuse me, we've had occasion to recall that Hashem also has faith in us, right? Like we say in the morning, Rabbi emunatecha, great is your faith in me. So there always seems to be this testing going back and forth.
But getting specifically, the bitter waters, I always understood that meant that they were undrinkable, that they were poisonous and they needed to be purified, and that's what the stick did. You're saying something else. You're saying it's as if Israel's saying, no, this isn't good enough for us. We don't want to drink this. It doesn't taste good. Is that?
Certainly on a deeper level, that's part of it, and that's part of the message that we discussed this week also. And I think that the bottom line of it was about, do we have faith that Hashem is going to be with us or not? I think that's the bottom line of the...
It's actually expressed that way, isn't it?
Yes.
Is God in our midst or not?
So, the Parsha continues, and we, we encounter the last day of the provisions that were brought from Egypt. It's finished now, the food that they brought with them. And this is another test. It's a test of their hunger, right? If only they actually said, if only we had died by the hand of Hashem in the land of Egypt, as we sat by the pot of meat when we ate bread to satiety. For you have taken us out to this wilderness to kill this entire congregation by famine. And then Hashem said to Moshe, behold, I shall rain down for you food from heaven. Let the people go out and pick each day's portion on its days, so that I can test them, whether they will follow my teaching or not. This is a huge, huge lesson, the idea of the manna. We've taught about this many times, how it symbolizes and is the source of understanding of the whole concept of livelihood and what a person has to go through in this world in order to receive sustenance that's already been decreed by heaven. How there's actually an idea that on Rosh Hashanah, every person's livelihood is already decided. If every person's livelihood is already decided on how much that person is going to receive, then why do we have to work? Some people actually don't, but of those who do, why do we work? And according to the mystical understanding, the reason why people need to pursue livelihood is for tikkunim, for personal rectification at a level of the root of our soul, the things that we have to do in this world, the things that we have to go through in order to earn, to merit that which Hashem has decreed for us. But the whole idea of how, they had to gather exactly what they would need for every day and not become obsessed with the material possession, not gathering too much. If any was left over, meaning if a person gets too attached to possession, to the thing itself, then it rotted, etc., etc. All the things that we've learned about this. But if I may emphasize one thing alone at the moment. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Hineni mamtir lachem lechem min hashamayim, v'yatsa ha'am v'laktu dvar yom b'yomo, leman anisenu hayelech b'torati lo. The Torah says, I'm going to rain down for you food from heaven, so that people should go out and pick each day's portion on its day, so that I can test them, whether they will follow my teaching or not. This is an incredible statement because, first of all, remember, the Torah is eternal and doesn't just tell us stories and isn't anecdotal. So that means that, and this is something that we always learn, it's an amazing idea for us to live with. If we are in a Torah portion, and the Torah is telling us a message like this is now, it's every day, it's for every person. Hashem is saying, I am raining down on you bread from heaven. And this accompanied the children of Israel in the desert until they came into the land, 39 years. The question is, what does this mean so that I can test them? The verse is essentially telling us that the entire reason for the manna, for this incredible spiritual, physical, intimate, caring diet that God was providing for the Jews in the desert all that time, that the whole purpose of it was to test them. So what does that mean exactly? And how does that translate for us today? You know, there's a whole idea, which is a greater test for a person, wealth or poverty. And the sages discussed this at length in their commentaries about the manna. Basically, Hashem is saying, I'm going to take care of everything. I'm going to provide for you. You're going to have exactly what you need. And then I'm going to see whether or not you're following me, whether or not you're keeping my commandments. In other words, the test is actually going to be coming from a place of you're having what you need. So this is very profound and like I said, as we know, all the lessons of the dynamic of livelihood, our relationship with Hashem in terms of His providing for everyone's needs, it's all derived from the portion of the manna. Tremendous, powerful understandings, and the commandment of Shabbat, because they were commanded not to gather the manna on Shabbat. And then the next test of water, as we mentioned, and the command for Moshe to strike the rock. And the Parsha ends with the Battle of Amalek. Amalek attacked them, and Hashem's vow that he personally would destroy the memory of Amalek from under the face of heaven. There's a theme here that connects everything in the entire Parsha. And actually, there's several themes. The second theme I want to talk about in the next part of the show, because that actually relates also to Tu B'Shvat. But the first theme is basically what I would refer to as the biggest mystery of all the mysteries that we're touching upon here. All of the incredible, amazing concepts that are eternal, that affect all of us now. The greatest mystery is what happened that there were all of these recurring lapses of faith. And again, these are people that lived through the greatest period of time. The preparation for the Exodus, the 10 plagues, the differentiation between Israel and the Egyptians, and then the splitting of the sea, which was raw, pure prophecy and a glimpse of the rectified world and the future and everything that happened. And there's still, a few days go by and there's no war. I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to be tested by thirst and being parched in the desert. Obviously, it's not a simple thing. But still, when we read it, because we're sitting on our perch and we're reading about it, we feel this is bizarre. That's the way we react. Like, why were they so easily thrown off course? And of course, this is going to be something that's going to be happening for a long time now, as we come to the book of Numbers also.
Right.
Anyway, I wanted to offer some ideas here, if I could,
Okay.
if you'd indulge me for a moment. Again, the Parsha is packed with a tremendous amount of precious messages. I'd like to try and translate it on a more personal level for every person, because it is eternal. So what's going on here now is that after the years of bondage, the nation of Israel is leaving Egypt, and God is performing these amazing miracles for them before their very eyes. Now, I might look at that and think that from now on, from this point on, life is going to be great. They're leaving Egypt finally. But, the people quickly begin to realize that the road to their new life is going to be a long one. There's a lot of travail that's going to be fraught with a lot of new difficulties each step of the way. But there's a destination that they're trying to reach, and that destination is to become truly free. The plan to become truly free is going to be by receiving Torah and its responsibilities, because after all, only a person who accepts responsibility can be truly free. And that road is going to eventually lead them into the land where they're going to build the temple, as we read in the Song of the Sea. And so the ultimate goal of this whole experience of leaving Egypt is for a person to be able to lead as complete a life as possible. But again, once they're out of Egypt, they encounter many trials. They begin many journeys that they're going to have to endure, and these trials seem to be unavoidable.
It's life.
Exactly. And when we look at their behavior, again, their questions about their faith-based crises, it seems a bit inexplicable to us. So here's the thing. They were in the very deep impurity of Egypt. And they had to go through all the things that they have to go through in order to cleanse and purify themselves. That was the whole experience of the Egyptian bondage. And this Parsha, which basically describes the journey to freedom, and so these tests that are mentioned, many tests that are mentioned, escaping the advancing army of Egypt, and the lack of water, the repeated lack of water and food, and the war with Amalek, all of these tests in the end, they are resolved in miraculous ways. But yet, they keep on, having these crises of faith. After they see the splitting of the sea, after they see supernatural well and the manna from heaven, and the miraculous victory over Amalek, while Moshe raises his hands. But even with all these miracles, there's something that doesn't click for them. And of course, as we know, and as we will continue in the Torah portions, there are going to be many more pitfalls and tests that Israel will be confronted by. So I'm saying, it's a bit pompous. What is the word I'm looking for? Of us, from our perspective. But we tend to look at this and say, why did they have so much trouble believing after all of this?
Let me ask you a question,
miracles.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so when you're hungry or you're thirsty, it's a test of your faith, and the children of Israel cried out, and we have to assume that the hunger was real hunger and the thirst was real thirst. They were in the desert. There wasn't anything around, and it wasn't simply that they didn't have their afternoon snack. But to cry out to God, isn't that a greater act of faith than to just have your arms folded and say, well, God's going to provide for us? What do they call it in Hebrew? Magili? It's expected. Of course God's going to provide. The missing ingredient would be, what are we going to do about it? And that seems to be perhaps one of the things that later on in the book of Exodus, the building of the Tabernacle, actually shows people that they don't have to rely on a miracle. They can do it.
Where you're going with this is absolutely exquisite, and this is exactly where I wanted to go, because what I think is that in the beginning, at this stage, they're like little children, and they're basically told, you stand here and be quiet, and Hashem will fight for you. You don't have to do anything but gather up the manna, right? But faith is something that ultimately requires action, and it's something that one merits by being involved, right? everybody knows that the Holy Torah doesn't just tell us stories. It's not anecdotal, and it's not a history either. From each thing, we have to learn something from our lives. And that's why I want to know, what is Hashem saying when he says, I'm going to be raining this down on you every day to test you? You know, we need to think deeply about how we can identify this with our lives and our own journey that we traverse. So that's why, if you think about it, you know, if you look at this whole story as the story of each and every one of us, you know, we start out enslaved in Egypt, right? All of us. Some of us spend our entire lives enslaved in Egypt, and some of us only for a certain part of our lives. Some of us remain there forever. What does that mean, to be enslaved in Egypt? After everything that we've learned about the evils and the spiritual evils of that regime and its goal of rendering its denizens to be hopeless, robotic servants, what it means to be slaves in Egypt is that we are stuck in our habits, in our self-image, in our expectations, and Pharaoh has complete control over us. So we perform all of our actions, and we think, we're convinced even that we're free, that we're acting independently. But everything that we do, really the sum total of our being, is actually in accordance with all the rules that we become used to, things the establishment has taught us, accepted societal norms, the natural order of things that we become accustomed to, all the while thinking that there's no other possibility. And then at one point, all of a sudden, God helps us to move, and he opens the sea for us, and we merit a spiritual illumination, each one according to their own level. And suddenly we understand that we could change. We have to change, and we're inspired to go against the stream and to do something significant, to get out of Mitzrayim, which is of course Mitzarim, right? The narrow place that holds us and keeps us from breaking free. But what do we learn in the Midrash that's very chilling, Yitzchak? That sadly, it doesn't work for everyone, because after all, only 1/5 made it out of Egypt, right? And the rest remained there. So we're used to, the conventional way that we usually look at that is that we understand that either these people were too far gone to leave, or that they were simply not interested in leaving, they were too invested in serving Pharaoh. But you know what the other explanation is? That really, I think, resonates with the chimes of angst, of existential man? That they didn't believe that they could leave. That they didn't believe that they deserved to leave, or that they had it in them to leave. And this is what we say, that emunah, if we want to say that they're having a crisis of emunah here, emunah is a two-way street. In order to believe in Hashem, we also have to believe in ourselves, that we are redeemable. And I think that's one of the greatest lessons of Parashat Beshalach. We'll be right back to Temple Talk. Stay with us. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Richman here in Jerusalem, Israel. And today is the 11th day of the month of Shabbat, 5777, February 7th, 2017. This coming Shabbat, Parashat Beshalach, which we have been talking about at length. It is also on this Shabbat, Tu B'Shvat, which we will be talking about at length. And as the Rabbi mentioned earlier, this Shabbat Beshalach is also known as Shabbat HaShirah, because of the Shirat Hayam, the song sung at the sea. And you know, that song, Rabbi, you were talking about faith and the lack of, or the testing of our faith in God, and I guess the testing of God's faith in us, when we try God's patience. It becomes so crystal clear and it's just sub contrast because of the Shirat Hayam, because of the crossing of the sea. You know, God says, you know, just wait, don't move for a minute. I'm going to split the sea. It's on me. And really, up till then, the 10 plagues that afflicted Egypt had sort of been like a light and sound show for Israel, let's say, you know, because it certainly didn't affect them, right? They were spared it. They weren't in the middle of it. They saw it going on or reading the headlines. But now the story involved them. They were in the middle of it. This was really the first true test of their faith. And how did they respond? By singing that song of praise, which is, we say at the beginning of our of the Amidah, of the standing prayer each morning, afternoon, and evening. Hashem sfatai tiftach, ufi yagid tilatecha. God, open up my lips and my mouth will speak your praise. And that says it all. Like, there is an incredibly intimate relationship that was established right there at that first point of departure from Egypt, which, despite all the ups and downs and the lows, that will follow, and the crisis in faith, and the crying out, and the lack of patience, and the wanting to go back, and all that, I think that one moment of being perfectly in sync, man and God, during that experience, I think is sort of like the antidote that will always kick in and prevent the bouts of lack of faith from
self-doubt
from ever overtaking us.
In fact, there's a time-honored custom of reciting the Song of the Sea every single day as part of our prayers, and our sages say that one who merits to recite the Song of the Sea joyfully every day is guaranteed a place in the world to come. There's some sort of key to like we were saying before, a future rectified world. Mm-hmm. The Song of the Sea has that key. And I think it's because of the vision that it provides.
It's in a place of such pure truth.
It was
that
the first,
any place of pure truth is.
It was
that
the first moment along the way when they were able to
let their hair down,
break the pattern of being enslaved to their own, negative self-image, and the pharaonic psychology had made them enslaved to their own inner fear and to their own fantasies and creations that they allowed to have mastery over themselves, and thus it's like a bridge to the future, the Song of the Sea. Because
bridge to the future.
Our test today. We have the same tests today. We believe what the media tells us. We believe, accepted norms, societal norms, prejudices, and all the things that contribute to our lack of faith.
At the end, you mentioned before, at the conclusion of the Song of the Sea, where it mentions that we're going to head toward the inheritance, God's holy mount, that it says, the sanctuary that you, God, will establish with your hands. Very, very beautiful line. And that just reminds me that now is the time to mention the new video that we have just put out, the second in our series of Holy Temple Mythbusters videos. And this video focuses on the Holy Temple. Will it fall from heaven? And I'm sure some people would say, well, look, you said it right here in the Song of the Sea, that God's going to establish the Holy Temple with his hands. So what's our part? And again, this goes right back to what we were saying earlier in the show, that faith, the faith in God's establishing the temple has to be built on our own work and actually making the temple. That, as you put so beautifully in the video that we're talking about right now, that God will give his final authorization, his final sanction of our work. But the point is that this video, which we just released less than 24 hours ago, has already proven to be very popular, and it's a very, very, very accessible video, and it's I would say it's a somewhat erudite video, and it's sort of targeting a Torah learned audience, but we're seeing that everybody is able to relate to it, because I think the way that you, Rabbi, put things so clearly, and because of the genre of the video itself, it really brings out the very essential points and truths that you make in the video. So,
It's kind of a
2,
historical
gotta watch it.
precedent for us, because we are addressing the Torah study learners who basically have a tendency, at least in the organized thought groups, tendency to strip the commandment of its simple interpretation. And everything has a spiritual counterpart in this world, and this is something a point that we tried to make in the video. But obviously there is a spiritual essence that has to be of God's doing, which is the resting of the Shekhinah. But that has nothing to do with saying that the commandment has no practical, physical bearing on us or practical application. And to take one of the commandments and to totally divest it of its simple interpretation, that it actually has to be fulfilled like all the commandments, that is such a strange way of looking at things. And yet that's become a very popular notion for so many reasons, because it basically excuses inactivity and inertia. And just like we were saying earlier, true faith is something that is so connected to action and to living, for Hashem and to doing for Hashem in this world. And that's ironically, I say ironically, because the basis of all the mitzvot, of course, is action, is doing. But specifically when it comes to the commandments relating to the temple, 100 times the Torah tells us throughout the book of Exodus various forms of the expression of to do. You shall do, they shall make it, you shall make it. And so nothing happened here by itself. Nothing happened here in a supernatural way. And that's what this video is all about. It's about putting the plain meaning back into this important commandment.
And, of course, referring to the sources of our sages and Torah itself, to emphasize that the idea that we need to build a holy temple ourselves is not something that the Temple Institute came up with in the past 30 years, but it's been a known entity for thousands of years. Of course, the first temple and the second temple were built by man, and there is no...
And that it's a perpetual, eternal commandment, like all the commandments, that it was given at Mount Sinai forever, and that is a basic principle of Torah law and Torah faith, that the commandments are immutable, that we are obligated to fulfill our responsibility in this world, whether it's for something that's simple and easy and politically correct and socially acceptable, or something that is more out there and something that requires a lot more fortitude, like the building of the temple.
So we recommend that everybody watch the video, Holy Temple Mythbusters 2. You can find it on our YouTube channel, the Temple Institute YouTube channel. You can find it on the Temple Institute Facebook page. You can find it on the Temple Institute website. And a lot of media is picking it up currently, so you might find it elsewhere as well. It's, of course, follows the introduction to the series that we put out at Hanukkah time just about over a month ago. And it will be followed, God willing, in another month by the third part of the series. But right now, take a few minutes and have a look at this video, and I think you will find it very, very rewarding. Another aspect of the Song of the Sea, which sort of comes out in the same place as a reference to the Holy Temple, of course, is a reference which a sort of hint of Tu B'Shvat, which is the line, you will plant us...
That's the same line?
The same line, plant us in your holy mountain. And it's, of course, Tu B'Shvat is the new year for trees here in Israel. Rabbi, maybe you can explain what that means?
Whoa, I'm getting choked up about Tu B'Shvat. The basic basic building block or fundamental essential ingredients of creation is water. And water is a very central theme in the Torah when you think about it, right? From the very beginning of creation, what was there? There was only water, right? In the beginning of Bereshit, we read that the Spirit of Hashem hovered over the water. And actually 2 of the 6 days of creation are totally dedicated to water, right? Hashem separated between the water that was above the firmament and below the firmament, and let the waters gather together. And then there, still in Bereshit, we read about the rivers that were going out from the Garden of Eden. And then we read that the whole world was flooded with water. And then we read about how the forefathers met their soulmates at water. And also in the Exodus from Egypt, first Pharaoh decreed that all the male children should be thrown into the river. And then when Moshe was born, he was placed into a little basket on the river. And the first plague was change in the water to blood. And of course, in our Torah portion, we come to the splitting of the sea, we come to the Be'er, we come to the complaining about water.
Be'er is a well, spring.
And furthermore, if I may point out, in the future, Atid Lavo, in the future, in the time of the Geula, the redemption, Isaiah the prophet tells us that we shall Ushaftem mayim b'sason mimanei ha'yeshua, which means that you shall draw water with joy from the well springs of salvation. And then there are prophecies in Zechariah and Ezekiel about water, life-giving water flowing from Jerusalem. So look, here we come to the 15th day of Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, which is this Shabbat, and it's also all about water, because why is it declared to be the Rosh Hashanah of trees? So the simple interpretation, which is cited in the tractate Rosh Hashanah of the Gemara, talks about the fact that the majority of the rains have fallen by this time, and there's a certain kind of sap that rises up in the trees, and that this is the day, the Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of Shvat, is the day that the fruit actually begins to form. Interestingly, in the Jerusalem Talmud, it gives more like a inner explanation rather than an outer explanation about, what's going on in the trees. And it says there something very enigmatic. It says that until this point, until Tu B'Shvat, the trees have been living from the water of the previous year. But from this point, they're going to be sustained by the waters of the coming year. So it's like a border that's being passed in time, and that obviously has a reflection on us as well. So, of course, water is life itself, and it's a direct expression of our faith in Hashem, and it has the ability to purify, and Torah itself is compared to water. And the splitting of the sea that we happen to be reading about actually on Tu B'Shvat this year is like the apex, because it was a clear vision of the mastery of Hashem and how He gives life and rules over life. And you know that we are taught by our sages that all the water in the world split at the same time that the Sea of Reeds split. And then at Marah, at Marah, which is named for bitterness, that's the place where we succeeded in sweetening the water and bringing it to a state that could be drunk, which of course is the whole purpose of what the Torah is given to us for. And that's why there's this idea that certain precepts were given there at Marah, because The whole idea of Torah is to give us the vessels that we need to deal with life and to receive the heavenly blessing. So,
which you talk about in the video teaching this week.
So I think that the idea of the confluence of this week's Torah portion with Tu B'Shvat is amazing, because water is really the key. And
isn't the Mazal the sign of the month of Shvat,
the bucket, right?
What do we call that? What's the English?
The Deli, the Aquarius.
Aquarius.
Right. That's also something that we spoke about at the beginning of the month. The idea that this is also the very same time that Moshe was giving over the oral Torah of the book of Deuteronomy. Mm-hmm. So that the water of Torah is literally raining down on us as well.
But the earth itself, just like you said before, there's a border here between last year's the last year's energies and the New Year's energies, and right now the trees come Tu B'Shvat begin to be energized by a new energy. New waters.
And not only that, but I think on a deeper level, the whole idea of this Shabbat being called the Sabbath of Song is not only because we read the Song of the Sea, but because the concept of Tu B'Shvat, which generally falls out this week, this week it actually falls out on this Shabbat, but it's like the whole earth is preparing to sing, is beginning to sing. It's the spirit of life is being renewed. And that has so much to do with the other concept that I was trying to dwell on in the first half of the program, faith, because that's what brings us to song. That's what brings us to this joyous expression. You know, we are who we are reading about. The Torah is eternal. I was trying to emphasize, and the idea is all the tests that the Israelites are going through in this week's Parashat that, like I say, seem to us to be so hard to understand. How could they be so wishy-washy? How could they not have been convinced? How could they have seen such great things and then, kind of backslide to these nagging doubts? This is our story. This is exactly what the human condition is all about, and that in itself is a song and a celebration. This is who we are, and Hashem knows that, and like you said so eloquently, the idea is, it's not going to come about by witnessing miracles, believe it or not, because this is what we see in this Torah portion. That they saw miracles, they participated in miracles, and it didn't bring them to faith, because the faith is only something that is developing when the relationship develops. And first and foremost, that takes a leap of faith in ourselves, which is not such an easy thing, because that's what Pharaoh succeeded in destroying in them, and that's what the modern day pharaohs of the media and social media and norms and all the things that we are enslaved to now, that's what they convince us of also. And so the first thing that we have to understand is that in Hashem's eyes we are always redeemable, and then maybe we'll be able to convince ourselves too that we're redeemable. But this is where it all comes together, Tu B'Shvat and the Song of the Sea and Parashat Beshalach. It's like a celebration of our realizing that we can leave Egypt even now. We still can leave, and it's not for naught that the whole idea of the Exodus from Egypt became such a major principle in Torah, not only because, as we mentioned, I think it was last week, that it's a parallel event to creation and it was witnessed by the whole world, and it represents Hashem's mastery over nature. It's not only that, it's because the challenge of leaving Egypt and not being enslaved anymore is the most real challenge that we constantly have. It's part of who we are. It's part of our legacy as people. The only real problem now is that when we are enslaved, and God forbid we are amongst the fifth that doesn't leave Egypt, that's something that we're choosing, and that's scary, that we choose to be enslaved. And so it's really up to us to break free.
It's up to us to break free, and I think also we have to be aware of that process. I mean, you just mentioned it was amazing that Israel got out of Egypt and did all they did, and then when they expressed a lack of faith it was as if they forgot everything that they themselves had accomplished, or how far forward they had come. And I think that often, today we're afflicted with that we take a moment and say, oh, what have I done and who am I? And it's maybe a crisis of self-confidence, but there is in that, I think, also a germ of lack of faith in Hashem, because He is the force and the plan behind it all. Rabbi, here's the music. I'd like to wish everybody a very, very happy Tu B'Shvat this coming Shabbat. And once again, remind everybody to watch the Rabbi's latest Mythbusters video, Holy Temple Mythbusters 2. And thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.